Hi, everybody, and welcome once again to the Guitar Show podcast. This is episode 2 with our very special guest, Les Paul. Les Paul was my very first guest on the Guitar Show back in the day. A little backstory is needed here. I had worked in a small television studio in New York City back before there was the digital world, before cell phones, before the internet, if you can imagine. And back then, people really didn't have access to professional camera equipment, let alone a television studio at one's disposal. I was quite lucky. I was in the right place at the right time. Now, I didn't make a lot of money back then, but part of my deal working there was that I could have 2 hours of studio time to do anything that I wanted. Now, that sealed the deal. I did say I was lucky. So, the Guitar Show was born on August 27th, 1984, with Les Paul. I knew that Les played every Monday night at a club in New York called Fat Tuesdays, and he was obviously the perfect first guest. I summoned the courage to take myself down there to ask him if he would do it. I watched his 3 sets that evening, and I got to speak to him afterwards. I thought he would say, "Get away from me, kid," or ask me for a lot of money, which I didn't have. He did neither. He asked me what kind of camera I had. I told him I had an Ikegami 79A, which was kind of professional at the time, and he agreed. He told me I could come back the next week and film his show, and we could do the interview after his sets were done. I was beside myself. So the next week comes, and we set up and film Les's set, and he finishes. Let me tell you something about Les Paul. After each set, he talked to everyone that wanted to speak to him, and he autographed whatever they presented him, whether it was a Les Paul guitar, a photograph, an album, their shirt, their arm, their head. I mean, he would autograph everything, and he took the time to speak to every single one of them and made each one of them feel special. And he enjoyed getting a laugh and a smile from people, probably just as much as he did by making them smile when he played the guitar.
But when I grew up, I played like this, with no pick, see? There's a hotel in the city and five broken stairs. They serve action on the second floor. There's a graveyard in the southern doctor's office in the parlor.
The amazing thing about Les was that he talked to everybody the same way. Whether it was a little old lady from his hometown in Waukesha, or some starstruck young kid just learning how to play the guitar, or guitar greats that sat in with him like Jimmy Page or Pat Martino or Zakk Wylde. I mean, he was the same with everyone he met. Les was the epitome of the guitar. He invented the guitar that bears his name. He played the guitar better just about any guitar player that ever lived, even though he wouldn't say it. He invented the 8-track and multi-tracking, which revolutionized the music industry and much more. On top of the guitar mountain, nobody stands higher than Les Paul. It is my privilege to introduce you to the one and only Les Paul.
The guitar is a very unusual instrument. It's a very kind instrument. You can play nothing on the guitar. Just a person, total stranger, can just strum a guitar, and it's sweet.
and you can play anything. The first chord you learn on it is great. No matter what you do, you can't go wrong playing the guitar. While as if you played a violin, after 5 years, the neighbor wants to kill you. Or a trombone, or anything else. Everything sounds like it's a miserable instrument. Saxophone. Can you imagine a kid home blowing on that thing? You want to strangle him. So that part of my life was learning. Anything I learned was great. And there was so much to learn.
And did you ever have any formal training?
The only formal training I had was an elderly man that lived down the street from me that had a classical guitar. And he was the only one in my town of Waukesha that could play it. And he played a song, and it had one chord in it that I didn't know. And that was my training, was to learn that chord, which I finally got from him. It was a D chord.
It was a D chord.
Yeah. And after I found it, he got so mad that I found his chord that he burned his guitar. But I did learn the third. He says, that's my chord and you can't have it.
Can't have it.
And so he burned the guitar, and that destroyed that as far as he was concerned.
You're listening to the Guitar Show podcast with our very special guest, Les Paul. For more information about the Guitar Show podcast, go to our website at frontrowmusic.com.
Who were your influences? I know I've read places where Django Reinhardt was a primary influence of yours, as well as Charlie Christian.
Later in life, it went in this order. The first person that I heard play the guitar was a fellow named Pie Plant Pete. And he played country guitar, and he played fingerstyle, and that's who I played a little bit of tonight. And that's why I changed my name to Rhubarb Red, because rhubarb and pie plant are so much alike. And I idolized a guy named Pie Plant Pete. The second guy happened to be way on the other side of the road with Bing Crosby, Paul Whiteman, Connie Boswell, the Boswell sisters, the Mills brothers, and so forth. And that was Eddie Lang. And the next person to really influence me, I believe, was in 1934, was Django Reinhardt. And when Django came along, that was when I quit playing the piano. By then, I was going to be a piano player. Mm-hmm. I happened to hear Art Tatum quit the piano. I says, no use trying to play the piano with Tatum
with Art
around.
Tatum, sure.
I can't make it. Then when Django come along, I said, well, there's no use playing the guitar because he's way ahead of me on the guitar. But come to find out that I decided to stick it out and keep playing. And then, of course, many other guitar players came along in the 40s. In the 30s, there were probably only 10 guitar players in the United States. In fact, I was asked in 1941 from Downbeat magazine to pick my 10 favorite guitar players. And I had to stop at 9. I could not find 10. And I said, will you take 9? No, you gotta pick 10. And I had to pick a 10th one. I won't tell you who it was. But anyway, I did scrounge up 10. And the union books didn't even have the electric guitar listed. They did not consider that a different instrument than a regular guitar. Anyway, up until 41, I didn't have too many people to listen to or to admire, other than Eddie Lang and Django Reinhardt.
I heard you, your first paying gig, I hear you made an awful lot of money. What, down at, I think it was a barter deal or something like that.
It was a barter deal, yes. My mother sensed, I guess, that I had some business ability besides just playing the guitar, that I could kind of find my way around. Because I just knocked on the door of Marquette University in Milwaukee. And I said, I'd like to play on your radio station and sing. And they said, well, we'd love to have you. And they just went on whenever they felt like it. They had a bedroom and a crystal set in there, and they'd say, howdy out there. And it was one of those things. And so I says, how much are you going to pay me? They says, well, we don't pay anybody anything. And I says, well, I don't play for nothing. So I made a deal with them that they'd fix my teeth if I sang 2 songs. And that was my first barter job for radio in 1928 on WHAD at Marquette University in Milwaukee.
How the teeth hold up?
Well, it was the teeth they were by an apprentice there, a fellow that was learning, and there's a couple of whoops in there. But other than that, the guy said, "Don't do it that way." You know, there were those kind of. Teacher would say, "Now try it again this way."
Put them the right side up.
Yeah, yeah.
In the late 40s, you were in a severe automobile accident, and they were thinking of amputating your arm at some point. What happened? What was the diagnosis, and how did the doctor take care of things?
Well, the 1948, I had what they call Rocky Mountain spotted fever. And so Mary was driving the car, and we were coming back from the east going to the west. And it was a terrible night, and it happened to be with a lot of ice and sleet on the road. I remember the radio saying, "Don't drive unless it's absolutely necessary." It was very dangerous out. And when the car turned on the top of from an underpass, it turned and went sideways off the road. Mary screamed. She was driving, and I was lying down because I was running a high fever and very ill. And I remember straightening the car out. And I remember nothing other than I put my arm around her face, and we went off the bridge 500 feet down in the water. And it's an uncanny thing that Mary came out with nothing wrong. And I came out with everything that could be broken: the spleen, the ribs, 6 ribs, the collarbone, front and rear, the pelvis, my nose, which wouldn't have made much difference, the nose. In fact, when I think of the nose now, I have to tell you that one of the interns came along maybe 6-8 months later, and he says, "Just want to tell you, Les," he says, "I did you a favor. You probably don't realize it now," he says, "but I come walking by," and he says, "You didn't look like your picture." And he says, "I thought there was something wrong," and he says, "I just pulled on your nose," and he says, "It just popped right out." I says, "I hate you." But anyway, the biggest problem I had was my arm. And they were going to amputate that because there was about 7 inches missing between the elbow and my shoulder. And so they finally decided to take a piece from my leg and graft it into my arm. And the big question is whether it would stay on, and the second question is where do I want it placed? So to play the guitar, I guess in one of my more sane moments, I said, "Aim it at my navel," figuring that's about the place I would be strumming the guitar, and they did. And so the arm did stay on after 3 operations. They saved the arm, and Tick, I beat him out somewhere along the way. And I got through it. 1950, I was back playing again.
You still are.
A little.
A little.
You're listening to the Guitar Show podcast with our very special guest today, Les Paul. If you'd like more information about our series, please go to our website at frontrowmusic.com.
Then I think the next time in my life that was so exciting to me is when I came to New York and had the pleasure of playing with the Art Tatums, who I knew in Chicago, but in New York is where we really, really thrived on sharing with Lester Young, with Art Tatum, with all the greats that are known to man, Coleman, Hawkins, and I could name forever, the great, great players, where we had the pleasure of night after night after night after night of playing in Harlem, and I think that is the greatest time of my life, where I was surrounded and taught what's happening out there, and to work with Fred Waring and then have to turn your head completely around and go commercial so that Mom and Dad would not dial you off on the radio. So 30s had to be great. And then the next is the 40s, when it's no longer playing the guitar, but it's how to play the guitar, and that's Bing Crosby and the Andrews Sisters, who demand that you're playing at the Paramount, that you're playing on records, and you must play for the people. You can't turn your back on the people. They tell you what they want to hear, and it's up to you to get that feedback and lay it down on that record and then go to the bank with the money.
You were very influential. Matter of fact, you were years ahead of your time as far as what you've done in the recording studio with your multi-tracking. What kind of stuff did you do in the studio, and how, you know, why were you so ahead of your time with these? How come it wasn't done with other people?
It was a necessity. It came about. This is a terribly long question. I'm trying to make it very short. My mother had bought a player piano, and I pumped it. And when I pumped it, you know, Yes We Have No Bananas comes up on there, and if you push this lever, the keys go down. And so I learned to play whatever keys went down. I learned to play on the piano. And when I learned to play them on the piano, I got an ice pick and I poked a hole in there alongside, and another note came up. And I'd say, well, if I poked it just a little farther over there, I'll get the right note. So Mother got a messed up bunch of bananas. and so I did it with Barney Google. I did it with, there's a lot of blank paper before the thing starts. There's a runabout like I did in the Hillbilly song there. But to make it a little longer, this story, I made my first multiples that way. And it wasn't until I was with the Andrews Sisters that my mother came down to see me at the Chicago Theater, and she says, Lester, you were great Saturday night. And I said, Mother, I haven't been on the radio. I said, I've been working here with the Andrews Sisters. She says, well, somebody's out there playing just like you. And I says, well, Mother, I can't patent what I play. And she says, well, you better do something because they all put a pickup under there and they sound like you. And she says, can't you copyright what you're doing or nothing? So I went to the Andrews Sisters and I said, hey, I'm going to leave you guys. I said, I'm going home and lock myself in my Hollywood garage out there. And I got all this recording equipment, and I'm going to think up something that makes me different than any other guitar player. So Bing, the Andrews Sisters, everybody says, come on, work. And I said, no, I'm locking myself in here, you know. So I did. And one day, the first thing that came up is I started to dig out some records I made in 1931 where I was playing the bass part and the rhythm part. So I had a real bass, and I was playing the bass part, playing the rhythm guitar part, and then I'd play along with it myself. Well, I wanted to play another song, and so it didn't have it that way, so I just took the bottom strings of the bass guitar, found out that sounded better than the bass did for what I was doing, so I said, well, that covers that. So then one day, I happened to hit the wrong speed. And so I thought, well, I'll try that and see what happens. And that came back like the Nutty Squirrels or, you know, Donald Duck and that kind of a thing. So I added that to it. And then for 2 years, I worked on something that was not around, and that was echo. And they had echo chambers, and I didn't want an echo chamber. I wanted echo delay. It took me 2 years to figure that out. And one time in a saloon, we figured that out. We ran home, tried it, and it worked. I never patented it. I never patented any of this stuff. And we made that. And that's where you get, hey, 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 hey. Now I notice that my son, my little son, loved to dial short wave, Rusty. And his mother used to come in and say, "Leave Dad alone. He's listening to, they're playing his record." And I said, "No, I'd rather see what he picks out." And he'd dial to something that would go in and out of phase. So that was phasing. And I says, "Why does phasing attract him so much? I'm going to try that." So I took 2 phonograph records identically alike, put them on the turntables, put them on together, and then varied one and got it shifting in and out of phase, so it's drifting in and out. So I says, "Hey, now I got a phasing effect," et cetera, et cetera. Finally, I put all these things together, and out came what we call the new sound, which was created in the mid-40s, came out during my automobile accident. In fact, I was lying in the hospital and did not have the pleasure, I was unconscious, but later was told that it was a #1 record, and it was Lover in Brazil. And it was with all the sped up things and all the echo and the phasing things, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it was taken off for a brand new thing. And the ironic part about it is my mother didn't recognize me. It was so different that she didn't know what it was. But nobody else did either. But it caught on. And of course that became what later was to team up with Mary and become a whole new ball game.
I'm going to throw out some guitar players' names to you. If you could tell me a little bit about them, what you think, and preface it by saying, Tal Farlow or whoever.
Okay.
Okay. I'm going to throw out some guitar players, and you tell me what you think of them. Tal Farlow.
He's a very fine player and a very dear friend of mine, and he's a Jersey boy. We've known each other for many, many years. He's just great.
How about Wes Montgomery?
Wes Montgomery was also great.
I can see you're not going to have anything bad to say about anybody here.
I will.
Okay. Okay. The Bucky Pizzarella. You play with him at Town Hall.
Excellent player. Yeah. Excellent player.
Okay. How about Hank Garland? Did you ever play with Hank Garland?
Yeah. Hank Garland is a very dear friend, and after his automobile accident, which he never pulled out of,
Yeah.
and he is mentally ill. And I went down to visit him, and he says, "Let's go out in the backyard and throw rocks." So while I'm down there, we took in his backyard and we were throwing the rocks over into the neighbor's yard. And I said, "Hey, Hank, why don't we go over to the neighbor's yard and throw the rocks over into your yard?" He says, "That's a great idea, Les." So we went over to the neighbor's yard and threw the rocks, and that was the last time I saw him.
In 1977, you won a Grammy Award with an album you recorded with Chet Atkins called Chester and Lester. What are your feelings about Chet Atkins, and how did it feel to win the Grammy Award?
Well, it's a very interesting thing because the idea was Chet's idea to make the album, and it took 2 years for him to make the decision to do it after he thought of it, because he didn't think it would go anywhere. He didn't think that anybody would buy it. He says, I can only think of 2 people who buy that record: Lawrence Welk and Garland Barlow. He says he's going to die a death of death. But he says for whatever reason, maybe we ought to make it. So he called me back to say, "Let me think about it." And after 2 years, he says, "Come on down, we'll make it." And all the while we made it, he's saying, "It's never going to go nowhere. It's not going to go nowhere."
You ended up with a Grammy Award.
Yeah, and when we were sitting there for the Grammy Award, hi, Chet, and when we were sitting there, he leans over and he says to me, "Ain't going to make it." And I'm saying, "Keep the faith, kid, keep the faith. We're going to make it, we're going to make it." When we won the award, he was up there 5 minutes before I could get out of my chair. So we were very happy and very lucky to win it.
Sounds great. Is there any guitar player that you never had a chance of playing with that you would have liked to?
Yeah, well, not playing with, but I sure would like to. Well, I know Segovia and so forth and so on. Yeah, John, Paco, any one
Paco
of
de
them.
Lucia.
Yeah, Paco and John and
Al Di Meola.
Al Di Meola. Now Al comes over to my house and we play all day long.
Uh-huh.
And Al just sits there, and he's one of the great pickers. And there's a lot of players out
No,
there.
there sure is.
You know.
Speaking of that, you told me a story once when I was here to see you last week about the story where you were sitting on the corner in Harlem about 5 o'clock in the morning drinking Cokes with Wes Montgomery, George Benson, Tal Farlow, I think Pat Martino. What were you guys talking about at that hour?
Well, we were discussing. I guess it started out, or what I remember about it is Montgomery says, "Man, I don't know how you do that, Jazz." He says, "You just lay down all those parts, and you and Mary got all this stuff going." He says, "You're playing it and all those harmony things." He says, "That messes my head up." He says, "I could never do that." So I said, "But I could never play what you play." I said, "See, you sit down, you got all this jazz going. I don't know what you're doing." So Pat Martino he's in another world. He's doing this, and none of us can do what the other guy does, is what it amounts to. So each one of us is raving about the other guy, and none of us can do what the other guy does. And while we're discussing this and batting it around, I says, "Hey, did you guys ever think of what's happening on this corner?" I see there's probably 5 of the most talented guitar players in the world standing on this corner right now, you know, and how fantastic that is. How many times do you get 5 powerful guys like that to stand on a corner, and we're just talking dumb talk about
who can't do what?
Who can't do what? And every guy's sitting there like it's confession, telling you what they can't do. And nobody thought they were good. And none of us are.
What would you tell the young players out there about practicing and about playing at their craft, and what insight can you give them with all the knowledge that you have?
Terrible question for me to answer, because what I'm going to say, it'll be quite a shock to a lot of players, because I've read a lot of articles where they walk around all day with a ball, yeah, and they're squeezing it and exercising their fingers and everything else. I think they should put the ball in their head. Some of them make hard actions on the piano so that when they play on an easy action, so and so. Some say play on a real hard instrument so the easy instrument will be that much easier. Some say you should practice 6 hours a day. I have a different theory. After you have learned the instrument wisely and correctly, and you really have analyzed what you're doing, it is now up to where your head is at.
The thing that I like about a podcast is that it takes music back to where it belongs, and that is in your ears. We have over 50 podcasts featuring rare interviews and performances that will be upcoming from guitar greats from all musical genres. And do check out our premiere episode if you haven't done so already. And subscribe to our channel. It doesn't cost anything. And visit the Guitar Show series on YouTube, like us on Facebook, Instagram, and spread the word. And if by chance, if you care to see the videos of the Guitar Show, visit our website at frontrowmusic.com. Now we're going to wrap things up here with Les Paul. I can't say enough about Les Paul. Here's a man whose career spanned from Bing Crosby to Chet Atkins to Jeff Beck to Slash and beyond. His profound genius will reverberate for many years, if not generations to come. And one of the very special upcoming podcasts will feature Les with Jimmy Page, that was taped at Les Paul's house in Mahwah, New Jersey back in 1985, right after Led Zeppelin reunited for Live Aid in Philadelphia. Now, you don't want to miss this historic meeting of not only 2 great legends, but 2 great friends. And visit Les's website at www.lespaul.com to see more about his incredible life. So thanks for listening, everyone, and until next time.